Rounds, and this is Off the Bench. Today, we've got a couple of deaths. One was last week with Jake LaMotta, also known as Jake LaMotta, the Raging Bull. One of the best sports movies of all time. I'm surprised he made it to 95 years old.
Yeah, especially with all of the CTE and head trauma information that's been coming out lately, and how in football the deaths are becoming younger and younger, supposedly because of these head traumas. I think it's a good, not the death part, but I think his story is a good story, especially right now where boxing is really floundering a little bit with the emergence of MMA. And I know MMA has been around a while, but with this whole McGregor, Mayweather, now Mayweather's gone. Who's now going to be the story in boxing? They're trying to do triple G or Kano. Is it Kano? Kano and a couple others.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think right now boxing is in a state of flux, and I think it's a real loss that a guy that had this big of an impact, even though he wasn't probably a star name, they had
him ranked as number 52 on the top 80 boxers of the last 80 years. I mean, that's good. He wasn't one of the top 10 boxers of all time, but top 50, top 80, top 52, that's good. But it was really the story that everybody connected to, was a guy who had a rough childhood growing up in the Bronx in New York, and growing up in a time period that was very challenging. You're talking about growing up in the 30s and 40s, and being a boxer at a young age, and fighting against some of the best boxers of all time during that time period. You had World War II going on. I mean, there's just a lot going on during that time period. And for that story to come back out because of his death is obviously unfortunate because he died. But Raging Bull, I think, is, if you look back, it's probably a top 5 sports movie of all time. And if you think about sports movies, boxing sports movies are always on the top of the list.
Yes. Not just that. I think boxers as a whole, there's a lot of drama around the boxing world, not just in the ring, but out of the ring. And it really does, I think, stem from, you got to have a certain mindset to be a boxer. I mean, yes, you've got a couple guys that were just naturally born, and maybe they had an interest in it growing up, and they had to support a family, and they were from good neighborhoods. But a lot of times you see these boxers, and they, like they said, they came from rough childhoods, and that's what gave them that chip to be able to step into a ring and have that anger to go and fight someone for 15 rounds or 12 rounds.
And boxing, you look at MMA and these, what we'll call blood sports, quote unquote, there's a lot of trauma involved in the sport itself, physically. And we always talk about, like you were saying, concussions in football, but concussions in boxing are, I would imagine, considerably more significant. And for a guy to live until 95 as not only a boxer, but a guy who also had a hard life outside the ring is pretty impressive, because you never hear, I mean, Mickey Mantle, died fairly young because of things he did off the field. And for a guy who had such a hardcore party lifestyle, you don't see that nearly as much anymore.
And really, when it comes to CTE, you see it, brain trauma, you see it more in boxing than anywhere else, because you hear, punch drunk, and you see someone like Muhammad Ali, they have Parkinson's, they get the shakes. That's all from the continuous head traumas that they receive. Football, in a lot of ways, they say their trauma and their symptoms are like some memory loss and maybe some functional problems, but they don't have it to that degree. And I don't think we'll ever see it to that degree, because boxing, it's all about hitting the head. I mean, you've got some boxers who made their careers out of taking the body, but when you really look at the history of boxing, I think he's going to go down as more of an inspirational story than not, because he overcame a lot. He went into comedy. His life was something that was as much as his 7 marriages and going through a bunch of personal problems, issue problems, substance abuse problems, yeah. That it really ended on a positive note. No one is sitting there saying this guy, there is no bad words coming out about this guy. It's mostly praise.
Yeah, and also one of the stories that, as we're connecting this to things going on now, was the connection to the mob back then, and how tightly sports were connected to the mob because of gambling.
Especially boxing.
Especially boxing.
In Vegas.
Yes.
And the mob owned Vegas in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Think of the Rat Pack, all that stuff. And we're not saying this as a bad, it is just an interesting story that every aspect, everything from the Great Depression, which was the 30s, to World War II, which was the 40s, to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, 50s, 60s, and 40s that were the mob.
Yeah.
Then Vegas changed. Then it went into more of a spectator grand, when it started.
Let's not ignore the fact that there are still ties to underworld, characters within some areas of the world, and we're seeing it here with sports coming out with another scandal. So this is not something that's totally gone away. Certainly, it's considerably less than it was.
It's different. The mob had completely different reasons to be corrupt than, let's say, a shoe manufacturer like Adidas wanting to get their shoes on kids who could possibly be stars. It's totally different.
Yeah.
One is for power, the other one is for one is for power, which was the mob, and the other one was because they wanted their brand to expand. And some could say that's power, but I think that's more of a monetary investment. At least that's the way they see it. But he fought Sugar Ray
Robinson.
What, 6 times?
It was 5 times. They had planned on a 6th fight, but LaMotta retired at that point. He was actually gaining weight. He had changed weight class, and it really didn't make sense near the end of his career. Sugar Ray Robinson was more on a uphill trajectory, and because of a lot of issues, I think mostly outside the ring, LaMotta was kind of on a downhill trajectory in his career.
I think, and I've said this before already, but I can't get over the fact that I don't think the story is the boxing. I think the story is the world changing around him.
Yeah.
Going from the 30s all the way up to now, the world has changed so much. When it comes to the way women were treated, the way minorities started to get into boxing, the way that it now didn't become a prestige thing. It became how much money you could make and how many people are watching it, because then it became a TV phenomenon in the 60s and 70s. That's around the time that Rocky started to come out, was in the late, mid 70s, early 80s. Boxing was the sport of choice for most people when it came to entertainment, and it's still, like you said before, if it comes to strict entertainment, some of the best movies ever when it comes to sports were boxing.
Yeah, Rocky, in fact, even though Sylvester Stallone didn't necessarily have the capability to box, is still one of the top boxing movies of all time. It's still one of the top sports movies of all time.
His statue.
It's unbelievable.
His statue is in Philadelphia with him with boxing gloves. 100 or 200 years from now, they're going to think he was a real boxer.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a funny thing to think about. Now, also, let's talk about quickly how the MMA has changed the landscape of.
And sorry for our facts aren't exactly right. He was a long time ago, and we had to do a lot of research to be able to pull this up, so it's not just coming right off the head.
I had 2 hours of sitting in front of Raging Bull, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but it was back when they were making movies 2 hours long.
And people have got to realize, people our age, MMA is more of in the mainstay in our lives than boxing was. MMA now brings back the blood sport of
that boxing was.
Boxing was. And whether you agree with it or not, that it is MMA is probably the closest thing to the old Roman arenas where it was 2 gladiators going at it. Boxing is more regulated. Mm-hmm. You don't get ground and pound. You don't get strike kicking. Basically, MMA is a fight. They just took the death part out, but it's a fight to the death.
I wonder if we'll see, because MMA is moving more towards a wrestling style than a boxing style, obviously, than boxing. But in terms of concussions and CTE, if we see less of that in MMA, but we see more of the, these guys are going to have massive issues with arthritis moving forward in their lives. But I think, talking about CTE, does MMA have the potential for CTE for these athletes later in life?
I see it differently. Boxing you take a lot of jabs and punches to the face, to the head, and it's the repetitions that gives you the massive CTE. Now they're starting to say that offensive linemen they're seeing more and more dramatic CTE in offensive, defensive linemen than they see in wide receivers, the guys that receive the big hits that knock them out, because it's not so much the hard hittings, knockouts that is what really jars your brains.
Yeah.
It's the repetitive small hits over and over and over and over and over. And if you think about it, there isn't those repetitive strikes to the head in MMA.
Right.
They get them to the ground, it's boom, and their gloves are smaller. I think they're 8-ounce gloves. It's a lot easier to make a strike where you catch a couple knuckles to the jaw and you're done.
Right.
Or if you're on the ground, it takes 1 or 2 ground and pound, and the refs really are pretty good at saying that guy's defenseless, it's over.
Yeah, because LaMotta, you look back at some of the fights he was in, he was actually asking to get hit in the face because his idea in these fights were, I can take more punches than that guy can. I'm going to let him wear himself out punching me, and then I'm going to come out and hit him when he's tired.
Yeah,
and knock him down.
And in some ways, it was the way Muhammad Ali fought. He didn't ask to get hit in the face, but you remember Muhammad Ali used to lean up. Yeah, he used to lean up against the ropes, and let the guy tire himself by hitting the body and evading to the point where the guy was exhausted, and then he'd go beat him.
Yeah.
And I know it's fake, but that was sort of the way Rocky was.
Yeah.
Rocky was, he could take more punches than you, he would wear you out, and then he would come in.
Well, that was when Raging Bull came out, it was really the beginning of that whole thing of, oh, wow, this makes for great drama to see this guy get beat to a bloody pulp, and then he comes back and wins, right? And so that's kind of the Rocky Marciano legend came along in the movies Rocky, kind of a little bit based off of Jake LaMotta.
The interesting part is, and we'll be moving on to another topic next, but the interesting
Another death, unfortunately.
Yeah, but the next topic on this is, I think the reason why MMA is so popular is that you do get more of that blood element. Whether people agree with it or not, you see most canvases at the end of an MMA match.
It is gory.
It is gory. It looks like almost looks like a Tarantino movie out there, where it's just, where did all this blood come from? And it's not from the beatings. It's from the cuts.
It's from the cuts.
They get cuts, and there's guys that are just bleeding all over their face. So when we get back, we will talk about a Frisco death, and it has really been hard for the fans to take. Next.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made her college years happen. Whatcha? Opening that education savings account when she was little. Spearheading a campus tour. And another, and another, and another, and another. Bam! Deciphering financial aid. She was like, what? But now she's like, you aced planning for college. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
And as a huge soccer fan, I'm very disappointed to say there's been a death at Toyota Stadium. FC Dallas' season, if it's not dead, it's very close. They are on their last legs tonight. They've got a match against Colorado. Tim Howard's going to be a challenge to beat, and FC Dallas has had a challenge scoring goals recently.
And sorry we're so dramatic, but it has been a very dramatic couple months, because how long has it been since they've had a win?
It's been almost 2 months since they've won a match.
And we could not figure out the words to appropriately describe almost 2 months of non-winning. And the closest thing was as if there was just a bunch of dead bodies out there, because we could not understand how even bad teams are able to pull 1 or 2 victories out, and this has come out of nowhere. Last year we were decent.
We won 2 cup. We won the U.S. Open Cup, and we won.
We almost did the Triple Crown.
Right, and we won the regular season championship. So everybody was talking about, we're going to win the third this year. We're going to win MLS Cup. We started off just on fire. We were first in the league for almost the entire spring into the summer, and then all of a sudden at the end of July, things fell off a cliff.
And you are more of the soccer fan than I am when it comes to FC Dallas. He used to be a season ticket holder for a long period of time. I have asked you before, what do you think is causing this? And you can't figure out an answer.
This is the most bizarre thing to me, is trying to figure out what's going on right now at Toyota Stadium. They can't win road games, and we've known for a while they've struggled on the road. The beginning of the season, they actually were very good on the road. In fact, they had more points on the road than any other team through July. But something's changed, and we can't point to any specific incident or any specific injury or anything to really say why it's changed. It's just changed, and there's been a lot of things that have happened, but that happens to every club.
Do you believe it's the talent? Do you think it's the players they put on field? Because there are some fairly good players on our team, talent-wise.
My opinion is that it's not the talent. We've got a lot of talent. We've got 4 guys who have played on the U.S. men's national team at some level, either in the pool or actually in international matches this year, and from years past as well. Guys, they're not just getting pulled up. These are guys that have been on.
So this isn't a development team.
No. These are great young players. And then you combine that with 2 or 3 other players who play for their national teams from other countries. There's a lot of talent on this team, and everybody was very excited about this year because last year showed that talent. Last year was a phenomenal year. We showed the talent. We showed the depth of the team. Even when guys were injured, we were still winning matches. And this year, all of a sudden, at the end of July, something changed. And I literally can't figure out what it is.
So if someone came up to you and said, hey, Rick, as a fan, just trust in Poppy.
Man, that's been the thing for several years now, is trust in Poppy. It's the trust in the process that Jason Garrett likes to say. I don't know anymore if that's true, because he's made a lot of changes over the course of the last 3 months that, as an FC Dallas fan, as a soccer fan, confuse me. He puts lineups together that don't really make a whole lot of sense. He's changed the formation multiple times, and I understand he's trying to fit in different players, and different players on this roster fit to a different position on the field as far as the formation, but he's just made a lot of changes that don't make sense, and especially when a team is struggling, you don't want to make so many changes. You want to get some consistency so guys know where they're supposed to be on the field and hope that they build some chemistry around that.
So this sounds more like he's player-oriented than system-oriented. And the problem is you do not bring in players to build the system around them, because you've got multiple players that have multiple skill sets that come from multiple backgrounds when it comes to formation and skill and system style. The issue becomes the process. It needs to be. It's got to be the New England Patriots way.
Yes.
You have to come in, this is our style, this is
how
our
we're gonna
processes,
play.
you've got to adjust your game to us, because what happens is, if you all of a sudden go, we're putting this player in, the whole scheme's changing, yeah, it might do well for that one player, but what about the other 10 people on the field?
Exactly. And right now they've had a huge problem, and part of it is, yes, they've had injuries, but everybody has injuries. They've had injuries to good players. They've had injuries to Hedges, they had an injury to Walker Zimmerman, they had an injury to Mauro Diaz, and those are some of their top players. But they have good enough players to fill in those roles, and they showed that early in the season. When some of those injuries occurred, they still won matches. What's happened recently is they're not winning, they're not scoring goals, which is becoming a huge issue, because at the beginning of the season we were not having a problem scoring goals. But there was a question at the beginning of the season, can this team score goals because of the guys we had up front? A lot of people believe that we did not have enough talent up front. There was a lot of chatter about bringing in a Chicharito type player who literally, his job is just score goals. He doesn't do anything else, he scores goals.
So Moneyball sort of
Yeah.
thing. You guys bring in someone who might have faults.
Has a specific talent.
Yeah, and might
that
have
this team
faults
needs.
in other ways that the rest of
Yes.
the team can cover for, but he brings the one characteristic that your team doesn't have.
Yes, and they didn't do that. And
Could-
that's one of the concerns right now is oh, now we're seeing the fact that they can't score goals. This makes sense based on what we were seeing at the beginning of the season.
Can this be the reason why they dropped from 1st to 8th in the West?
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, the number one thing is they're not scoring goals. Number two reason is the defense.
That's kind of a given. If you're not scoring goals, you're not winning games.
You cannot win games if you don't score goals. And they had a prime opportunity at home against Seattle this, I think it was this last weekend or the weekend before, to win a game at home against a good team, a team that they need to be able to compete with if they're going to be in the playoffs. And they did not score one goal at home against Seattle. They ended up with a draw. But even if the defense is good, they can't score goals. It doesn't matter. They can't win, and they can't get enough points to move up. 1 point per match right now is not going to do it.
So outside of scoring goals, do some of these players individually have issues right now?
Yeah, so Walker Zimmerman is the biggest concern because last year, in the beginning of this season, he looked unbelievable. I mean, he was pulled up to the U.S. men's national team into their pool because of how he played last year and this year. And he's a young player. He's a very good defender, but he had a hip injury. And coming back from that, he doesn't look the same. There's something different about his game. He looks a little bit slower on the field. Him and Hedges are not meshing the way they were earlier in the season. So I think that's the biggest concern defensively because of how many goals they've been giving up. Offensively, I don't really know. I think it's part of the fact that Mauro Diaz only playing, partial games, not playing full games. A lot of these games during this time period, because of him coming back from injury, he's been coming on later in the game, not playing, from the start. Kellen Acosta coming off of USMNT, they didn't want to rush him back. So they only, start him, play him 45 minutes, bring him in at halftime, bring him in a little bit after. There's too much of that stuff going on. Pick your best players and play them.
A lot of people believe now that, and you usually get this out of desperate teams, that the FC Dallas will be able to sneak into the playoffs.
If they sneak into the playoffs, they're certainly backing in based on the way they're playing right now. They can still get into the playoffs, but my concern is the same as the concern I've had with the Mavericks and the Rangers, is what use does it serve them to get into the playoffs the way they're playing?
They just get smoked.
Exactly. Now everybody says, look, just make the playoffs. You never know what's going to happen. But the way this team is playing right now, unless something dramatic occurs, changes, Poppy decides, you know what, we're going to play this way, whether we lose 4-0 or not. I'm for that. They just need to get consistency. The thing I have is, if you have an older team, like the Rangers had before this season, is you can't just say, okay, let's just flush it down the toilet, try again next year, because some of these players are going to have more injury concerns as they get older. FC Dallas is a young team. You have an opportunity here to build, continue building. And I think part of the problem I have with Poppy is making all these changes is not building.
So why don't
we
we
need consistency?
Yeah, why don't we just talk a little bit about the last 10 games? The last 10 games they've been outscored 23-8. That is really showing the lack of scoring.
Lack of scoring and how many goals they're giving up. 2.3 goals a game is way over their normal average. They're normally
way over anybody's average.
In the 1.6 to 1.8 goals per game. And that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's a lot.
So do you think Poppy has a chance of being let go at the end of the season?
No, I think Poppy is going to get the benefit of the doubt with a young team and with the injuries that he's had, the same way that Rick Carlisle, when the Mavericks were having injuries, and the same way that Ron Washington had when they were having injuries, and the same way Jeff Bannister when they're having injuries. They're going to get the benefit of the doubt. Jason Garrett, when Tony Romo was injured, he got benefit of the doubt. I think you're going to see Poppy get benefit of the doubt here. If they have another full season of this type of soccer next season, it's going to be a nightmare for them. I think if they come back, they be consistent, they come back with the same process next year, they're going to be fine. I think this is something weird is happening. There may be a cancer in the locker room that they need to get rid of. But one player out, I think they're going to be fine next year. But they're only going to be fine if they decide they're going to play consistent soccer for the rest of the season. And there's only 5 games left.
And with that, when we come back, it'll be our speed round next.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Pre-diabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
And we're back, speed round time. We were just talking about what we're calling the death at Toyota Stadium of FC Dallas.
I know that's morbid, but there's no other real way.
It's been a morbid show so far, so we're going to change it up, and this is going to be fun. It might be a little bit of yelling involved too.
So first we start with Rick Pitino.
This is unbelievable. I mean, the scandal story that we talked about yesterday, this is one of the biggest scandals that people are saying this could be the biggest sports scandal of all time.
I don't know about that.
Not yet. Let's hold our horses. Now, if it comes out that there's more than 10 big D1 teams involved in this, now we're talking. But right now, it's 4 or 5 teams. Pitino's the only head coach that's been named as a potential problem in this whole process.
Chuck Person's been in it.
But assistant coaches.
No, he's the head coach of Auburn.
Okay.
So that's 2, but his program is nowhere near as big.
Nowhere near as big as Louisville. And Louisville is one of the reason Louisville was named is because they're also a huge Adidas sponsored team. So, I mean, they're one of the biggest programs in the country, whether you want to say they are or not. They are.
I think they need to make a point. Think they need to drop the hammer. I think it's time for the death penalty.
Ooh, and that brings us to the second point is, do we need the death penalty in college sports? I'm going to say no. I think the death penalty does not serve a good purpose. I think Rick Pitino should be blacklisted if all of this is true about Louisville basketball. I think he will be blacklisted. I think he will not have another major D1 coaching position.
All right. If we're not gonna do the death penalty, which affects the whole school, then what we've got to do is we've got to fire the coach, fire the athletic director, and you got to fire the superintendent of schools.
Yeah.
You just need to get rid of the entire administration, bring in a new, because that doesn't just end at the athletic director. If we're going to make a point, especially on the administrative side, it can't be a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
It's got to be, you are all gone.
But that's where I stop though, is the death penalty. When we talk about death penalty, it doesn't make sense because it hurts the school, like SMU, hurt them for 30 years, 40 years. I mean, they still have not come back.
I think it's not the students that are making this choice, it's the administrators.
Yeah.
And so if these administrators are going to be so cavalier with the fate and the future of these schools, they've got to be gone.
Yeah.
No more is this, they can stay in for life and all they get is a slap on the wrist, or they get moved to another position that basically has the same pay. These people need to be gone. It needs to end. And what happened is, as long as these people are still empowered, the chances of it happening are probably better than you'd have if you have a new administration.
Yeah, and it's a sucky position to be in for the NCAA, to have the fate of a college program in your hands when you're trying to make this decision. Other college sports, college football, who are your top 4?
Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, and Penn State. Now, Penn State I have at number 3 because I think their running game is going to really dominate teams other than Alabama. The reason why Alabama is so good is not because of their passing game. It's their running game.
Yeah.
They bludgeon people to death. And I think Penn State has a chance to do the same thing. All it does is eat up clock, and if they can't be stopped, then you better hope your defense or your offense has the ability to score with Penn State.
In fact, the thing that we look at with all 4 of these teams is they all 4 have a very good running running
to
back.
one degree or another. I mean,
Yeah,
you've got
and-
Penn State, who's the
Right,
pinnacle.
it's not necessarily the running backs. Obviously, with Clemson, it's the quarterback that's a good runner. Baker Mayfield is a good enough runner outside the pocket
And a scrambler.
to make plays
Yes.
happen. Kind of similar to the way Dak is when they make him capable of doing so. I'm not saying great run. We're not talking about Lamar Jackson here.
No,
but we're talking about they know how to run the ball.
Oklahoma's a little bit different than these other two. So Hurt for Alabama can run.
Yeah.
He can flat out, he could break a 40-yarder whenever he wants. You know, the play has to be designed, but he has the speed. Same with Clemson. They've got a quarterback who is as athletic as Lamar Jackson. Alabama's different.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma's different. Oklahoma is not built for the quarterback to run. Baker Mayfield is basically a magician in the pocket. You see him, what he does is he bounces in and out of the pocket. He makes it so he sets up his offensive line so they're completely covering the defensive line. Even if they get penetration, he moves so that even if the offensive line don't realize it, they're in position to block for him. That's his skill. You see him every once in a while breaking a 5-10 yard run. You don't see him breaking a 30,
but that also,
40-yarders.
not talking about the quarterbacks, so just running the ball, period,
Yes.
that helps set up a lot of their running.
And their running game, they've got a three-headed monster with Oklahoma that is really good. They've got Sutton, who is a power runner. They've got Adams, who's basically their every down back. He's the one that's last week averaged almost 10 yards a carry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's what we're seeing, though, is the best teams in college football are the teams that can run the ball.
Yeah, and they have a quarterback that can throw the ball
who's
down
capable,
the field. Yeah,
yes.
that's capable of throwing the ball down the field.
And so I have the same top four as you do, and I don't see it necessarily changing throughout the season. USC could surprise me. Right now, I think USC is a little bit overrated.
Sam is not playing at that level.
So I'm not going to put them, and that could change. So I mean, he could step up. He's a redshirt freshman. He could step up and be a great quarterback by the end of the season.
He's
but right
thrown
now,
6 picks in the first.
it's still early. We're
All
still
right.
early on.
All right,
Give him a break. Okay. Does Dwayne Wade make the Cavs a better team?
Well,
The banana boat team.
Well, now they have a full crew for the banana boat. I don't know. I think he would be a great fit to come off the bench.
Yeah.
I have no idea if he's willing. But this team right now is getting older and older and older. They've got a lot of old players on there. And they're going against a really young Golden State Warriors. You know, the average age in that is like 28.
What we're making an assumption here.
Yeah, I mean, the chances of... The only thing I see is there is a probably 50-50 chance, which is good, that the Celtics take the East.
That would be exciting to see. It would be a nice change of pace based on the last few years. But Dwayne Wade does make the Cavs better, but I'm not sure it makes them better enough.
Yeah, I mean,
which is a terrible.
I don't see him
thing
even
to say.
coming off the bench. I do not see him playing 82
Well,
games.
he
plays maybe 60.
He's going to get the start of the biggest season because Isaiah Thomas is not going to be available because of hip injury until Christmas time. So I think we're going to see Dwayne Wade get enough minutes at the beginning of the season to get back in rhythm with LeBron. And then what they do is they bring him off the bench as a sixth man. And in the playoffs, he's a finisher.
He is a
bring him on
finisher.
the court to help LeBron finish games. And I think that's going to be the biggest benefit he's going to have to that team.
My issue is with him, he hasn't been able to finish play all 82 games in any of the last couple seasons. I mean, I really have a hard time seeing him play over 60 games. He really doesn't do well on the health side of the
They're going to have to
of
limit
the
his
game.
minutes for sure.
Yeah, so what's the point of starting a man who, you know, I guess you have put his minutes heavy in the first couple games until Isaiah comes back, and then you bring him off the bench. But when you bring him off the bench, is he the kind of player, because he's never come off the bench before, is he the kind of player that when he comes in, he needs to get warmed up? Because bench players are supposed to be the immediate spark. They're supposed to come off and boom, it's like you haven't missed a beat.
Speaking of coming off the bench, Nerlens Noel, can he come off the bench and be as effective as he was as a starter?
I can't tell if this is Dirk is better for this lineup or if they're trying to make a statement to Noel. I don't know. I really think, knowing Mark Cuban and how weird he thinks, I think it's a statement saying you should have signed with us. We're not just going to hand you the keys. No, we're not going to hand you a key to get a max contract. I think that he's really planned it out so that And this is how diabolical Mark Cuban is. I think there's a chance that he has planned this thing out so that at the end of the year, Noel's stats are still low, and they can sign him.
They can sign him cheaper.
They can sign him cheaper. No one else is going to get a guy who is not getting starting center
So
minutes.
my position on this is they're using this as a statement right now, but I think that Noel will be the starting center by game 6 of the season or earlier.
And so does it officially move Dirk to the bench?
I think Dirk goes to the 4. You see
Harrison Barnes
at the 3. You'll see Wesley Matthews at the 2. And you'll see the 1, Dennis Smith Jr., depending on how well he plays. I think Wes Matthews is a potential trade piece.
Yes. I can't see. He did horrible last year. He doesn't fit this style.
He needs to go to a Golden State. He needs to go to a Boston where they can use him off the bench as a 6-man, 7th-man type of player to come off, score, and play defense. I don't think he fits where this team is moving towards.
Yes. I think Seth Curry.
Seth Curry
is a better player right now than Wes Matthews. The only thing that Wes Matthews brings is the occasional hot streak that he goes into where he scores
and
a
he's
bunch
a little
of threes.
bit better defensive player.
Yeah. But right now, he's just a locker room presence.
But the way this team is going with Dennis Smith Jr., a young point guard, I think you need a young shooting guard to put next to him. I don't think the way this team's going that Wes Matthews is the right guy to put next to him.
And I really hope that Rick Carlisle puts an emphasis on passing, because I can easily see Dennis Smith Jr. being a ball hog, being a James Harden
type,
or an
Westbrook.
or an RG3. RP.
Russell. Who are you thinking?
CP3.
CP3. There you go.
There's so many 3-letter names in the NBA and NFL. But CP3, I don't want to see a ball-centric point guard. And he has a chance of doing that.
Okay, MLR, Major League Rugby. This is the second shot at a professional league in the last few years for professional rugby in the United States. Can professional rugby exist in the United States?
It can, but not the way they're doing it now. It's not the style of play. It's not rugby itself. They need to find an investor who's willing to put, or a bunch of investors who are willing to put $10 to $20 million into the league.
And willing to lose it.
And willing to lose it for 4 or 5 years. They need to say, this is our burn.
Right.
Basically, they need to go into the owner system. These teams need to have owners that are willing to put money in. They own stock in basically stock in the league, broken up. Let's say there's 10 owners that each one gets 10%.
Yeah.
And what they do then is their entry fee is $2 million. And what that does is it pays the $40,000 to $50,000 to $60,000 per player in these leagues.
That needs to get paid so that these players are legit professional players.
And they have to have a burn rate. It's going to take 2-3 years of constant rugby to be able to start really bringing in advertisers. And they go, oh, we're broadcasting. They broadcast on YouTube and Facebook. That's not going to work either.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what their marketing plans are. So I think they did that.
Pro rugby was poorly advertised.
Yeah, I think that was, if we build it, they will come sort of thing. They probably banked on the fact that there's a large rugby community in the U.S. and that these people would go and watch, when really people as ex-rugby players, all we care about is the Quins and the national team, or your club team and the national team. We don't care about local clubs other than to see what level of rugby they're playing at.
Yeah.
It's a Luke. Right now, it's a medium. You've got the high-end international rugby.
Yeah.
You've got the national team that is a little bit lower than that. Then you've got club. There's no room for middle.
Yeah.
So these guys need to move up as quickly as possible. Like I said,
they
the burn
need to be
rate.
at the national team level of rugby.
Yeah, international team. They've got to be able to go out and play against international teams.
Professional teams.
Yes, they need to be able to go play teams from Ireland. They need to play teams from England, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. Argentina. They need to play these professional teams there. And unfortunately, you're going to have 4 or 5 years of burn rate with an incrementally increasing salary to bring in these good players to make this work. If not, it's not going to work.
Major League Baseball, we're coming down to the end of the year. The Rangers were actually just eliminated from the playoffs mathematically. What are your AL and NL championship series right now?
I don't know.
Killing me. Okay.
The reason why I don't know is The problem with baseball is if your home team isn't doing well, it's really hard to watch other teams doing well.
Yeah.
For instance, Darvish goes to the
Dodgers.
To the Dodgers. He was okay for us this year, and he's on the DL there. The last time I checked, he was on the DL. And they're going to make the playoffs, and there's probably a decent chance that they win the World Series. It's hard for me to watch that team.
Well, we don't get all the games on TV either. It's not the NFL where pretty much all the games are on TV. Or you get
And they're
a
on
good
at
majority of
obscure
the teams,
times,
yeah.
like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or at 8 at 10
Well, if you want to
o'clock
watch
at
the
night.
Dodgers, it's going to be 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Yeah.
And unfortunately, they don't have the same draw as a NFL college
Yeah.
football. They just don't. There's 162 games?
162 games.
There's 162 games. The problem is the mindset goes, if I miss a couple, no big deal.
Yeah.
And then you lose track, and then NFL season starts. It's really hard. For me, it's more of a looking at the standings. How
As
are
a
they
sports
doing?
nerd, I've already got my AL and NL championship series. I'm sure you're
Okay,
not
so
surprised.
let's-
In the AL, I've got the Indians and the Astros. The Astros, obviously, just recently in the last couple of
I
years.
like the Astros because Shreen likes the Astros.
Moving over to the AL. They had a phenomenal season. Everybody expected them to have a good season. They easily won the AL West. The Rangers were just hoping to get a wild card spot even by the end of July. I think that the Astros beat the Indians. I don't care how hot the Indians were during the middle to the end of the season. I think the Astros have a better team. They got Justin Verlander, which is going to be a huge pickup in
Yes.
the playoffs for them. I think that pitching staff can beat the Indians' pitching staff. I don't think it goes more than 4 games in my.
So that's
in my
Indian
opinion.
Astros for you.
Correct.
For the
in the
NL.
NL, I've
AL.
got Dodgers and Cubs in the NL. So I think the Dodgers win. I think the Cubs do not have the same level of intensity. They have not played nearly as well this year as they did last year. And the Dodgers are on fire. They traded for the Rangers, got Darvish. I think that was a huge upgrade for their pitching staff. If he's healthy, that's the team to beat. In the
Sounds
NL.
good to me. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the Rangers and why we think.
Real quick, yes. I think they need to try again for the playoffs. You may not agree with me on this one. It's either reset or try again for the playoffs. And trying again for the playoffs, meaning that they've got a lot of guys who are younger, but they've got some elderly guys. They've got to.
I'm sorry. They got to rebuild. They got to rebuild. I think all they have right now are development league players and older statesmen. They are not 1 or 2 players. They're not 1 player. Hell, they're not even 2 players away from what they were in 2011, and they couldn't even pull it out in 2010, 2011. I'm sorry. They need to rebuild. They've got half their players are over 30, and the other ones are little pups. They do not have the staff on the field, not the pitching and that staff, but they don't have the players to be able to pull off a playoff run. They just don't. They're going to just continuously have injury problems with the older players and development problems with the younger players.
Oh, agree to disagree. Tomorrow we're going to talk Frisco High School football, and then next week we're going to be finishing up with some. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the weekend, and we've got Thursday Night Football tomorrow, and a preview and some power rankings of the NFL.